saying that they like my style. Wanna know how I do it? I smile. While you were out there saying hey, hi, hello, I was getting dressed up in shades of yellow.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Lovely Job podcast. I'm Leah Spicer-Pownall, I'm the marketing manager of Miss Bush, and this is...
I'm Emma Marshall and I'm the MD of Miss Bush.
And Miss Bush is... You want to talk about?
Actually, I do want to talk about it because it's super relevant to one of the things I want to talk about today. Miss Bush is one of the oldest boutique brands, bridal boutique brands in the UK. So actually, the very first time that Miss Bush doors opened was in January 1988. So it means that January is effectively our 37th birthday. And it's kind of weird because I was like 21, 37 years ago. So you just think that that's a phenomenal amount of time for something to be kind of like running in the same location, retail wise. It's very, I think this day and age, that's something of a miracle. So, so that's who Miss Bush is. Miss Bush is, one of the oldest UK bridal brands.
Amazing.
It is quite amazing.
She's just a year younger than me.
I think she's exactly the same age as Ben and Adrian, actually. So
Adrian is a year younger than me.
Yeah. So basically, that is the same age. But it is when you think of that scope. You know, it's a bit like the things they're doing about 80s albums at the moment. Like, go consider it was 40 years since Wham did this. You know, you're like, oh, that's just it doesn't feel that long ago. So. There's a couple of really interesting things I've done for some trade articles, really, which is firstly that this looking at any predictions towards the future, any bridal shop that opens up today doing what we do is not likely to last 30 years because the industry is not likely to last 30 years. The entire wedding industry as we know it is not likely to last 30 years. So that's quite a terrifying prospect.
It's scary.
It is scary, but also, you know, I mean, speaking to any retailers out there, nobody in Miss Bush opened it to have this longevity. And I don't know, is it too boring for me to recap how Miss Bush has come to pass?
I don't think so. I also think it'd be fun, actually, if you could tell people who Miss Bush was, because that's something we've not spoken about before on the podcast.
We not on the podcast?
No,
we've spoken about it all sorts of places. Okay, so I'm going to start at the beginning then, 1988. The Miss Bush, the original Miss Bush, was across the road from where we are now. So there was still a retail space there, but it's now hairdressers. So squashed between the pub, the sort of legendary Central Village pub called The Ship, and what was a family-owned like grocers at the time, Richardson's, which has now become a one-stop. So that's the original location of Miss Bush, and the original owners of Miss Bush were a couple called Jean and Ian Johnson, and the freehold of the building was bought as a sort of pension fund investment by Ian. And actually, as Jean loved sewing and crafting, and actually opened a wedding dress shop there. So I'm not saying that she was a hobbyist, but I kind of am, because I've heard this narrative quite a lot of times when people with money think it would be really good to open a wedding dress shop. And, you know, because it takes a lot of money to open that. Bearing in mind that her husband owned the freehold of the building, she, in the very small amount of time that she owned it or was MD, never took a salary at all. So this is the kind of thing that I think is a sort of a hidden secret in bridal retail, that there's a lot of people effectively not making any money whatsoever and working for nothing. And that's quite criminal. But so she had this for a little bit and realised that she needed someone to do sewing and fittings. And her and my mum, who is with me right now today, was in a City and Guilds class with them. They both did fashion and design together, and so they met through that. And my mum had recently got divorced and had stopped working in our family retail business, and was working in a doctor's surgery, which she absolutely hated. And also she was not very, very well disposed for, because she basically, patient confidentiality was not something she thought was remotely relevant. So basically I was working in my family retail business at a university holiday or something, and Jean came in and said, "What's your mum doing? Is she happy? Do you think she would like to work for me?" And I was like, "I'm sure she'd love to." So basically, like, that's when my mum started working for Miss Bush. So she was there as the production manager for 3 years. Just like, I literally told her, like, if she can snooze on the settee, she's not allowed to make a sound. She's going, "No, I won't." It's like, really, don't make a noise. And then after 3 years of not paying yourself and working in bridal and losing all your summers and weekends to retail, Jean, who was independently wealthy, was like, "I don't want to do this anymore, Jen. Do you want to take over the company?" So actually what Jen didn't do, she didn't actually take over the company. She set up Miss Bush Bridal Wear Limited, and was the MD. And at the time I was a uni student, and you had to have like a nominal company secretary. So I was a company secretary. So I've been so I think that was about 92. So yeah, about 4 years after the original setup of it. Yeah, so or maybe 91 actually. But yeah, I was when she set it up, I was not involved in the business whatsoever. But yeah, that's exactly how it went. And then yeah, it continued in that vein, really until a point where Mum wasn't really able to manage, direct, whatever, which I don't think she really did much of that. Mum, really, if truth be told, was always in production. She never did any sales appointments. She never did any marketing, never did any of that stuff. It's very easy to have a full-time job in production in bridal retail. So doing nothing but fittings and sewing and alterations. And then it came to a point where that building was no longer viable, realistic. So this is when we had set up Miss Bush as it is now. I'm MD. So it's actually three legal entities, but my mum is the thread in all of them, basically. So, and my mum is no longer involved with the business at all, but is, quite ancient, actually, just about to turn 89, actually, and is staying with me right now. So, I think her interest in bridal retail is, it's non-existent now, which is great because it's very overwhelming and all-consuming. So,
So the original building was a sweet shop, wasn't it? Before it was a wedding dress shop, and it was called Miss Bush's, wasn't it?
No, actually, it wasn't.
Oh,
it was called Ye Olde Sweetie
it was,
Shop.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ye Olde Sweetie Shop, like, and done in the most kind of like, I don't know what
lettering, wasn't it?
Germanic script and sort of like, that really weird kind of, you can't read it kind of lettering. So it was known as, it was Ye Olde Sweetie Shop, because it was a timbered building and, it had like bay windows and things like that, had beams on the ceiling. But it was run by someone called Miss Bush. So it was just known locally as Miss Bush's. Miss Bush is actually still alive, whose name is actually Margaret Field, was running this shop in the 60s. And her daughter and I went to school together. So Liz, who's now Liz Berman, Liz Field and I went to school together. But the scandal was that Liz... surname was never Field, and Margaret had a child out of wedlock in the 60s, which was deeply scandalous at the time. So, that's so the Miss Bush is quite ironic because everyone knew she was a miss, but she had a child and then she got married and then basically told Liz to just tell everyone that her surname was Field anyway. Remember, this was quite problematic when we all got our O-level results because Liz's certificates weren't right. But anyway, that's so that's basically, so I think that because it was known locally as Miss Bush's, then the original owners decided to call it Miss Bush's Bridal Wear. But that was just such a microscopic aim, to have a genuinely incredibly local business where that name only meant something to people that are actually, lived and worked in Ripley. That doesn't mean anything to anyone else. Just an interesting sidebar fact, actually. Eric Clapton's mother used to work in it when it's a sweet shop as well, because Eric Clapton is a famous son of Ripley. And actually his name is not Eric Clapton at all. His surname is Clapp. And so his first name is Rick. So his name is actually Rick Clapp.
Ooh,
so yeah, Rick Clapp.
That's a difficult one to say.
Rick Clapp, yeah, I know. So, and also Rick Clapp is one of those classic war babies as well, whose father was an American serviceman, anonymous, and one of those kids that was brought up to think his granny was his mum, but actually the person he thought was his oldest sister was actually his mum.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right?
Wow.
So there's quite a little kind of, villagey intrigue about the Miss Bush and the Miss Bush building and the name and the people that have worked there. So that's really the story of it. So it was never set up to have a name. And certainly Miss Bush's is not a name that if you gave it to a brand consultancy and go, I want to set up a really cool bridal shop, what are we going to call it? They'd come up with something like, well, like all the cool East London ones. They'd be like Heart of Flutter, the full bride, own studio, not Miss Bush, and it's like basically Miss Bush, and it's basically like the kind of bush. Even though like you've had President Bushes and bushes everywhere else, I saw there's a bush on the Masked Singer as well. Like not that I watched the Masked Singer, but of course my mum is like very confused if there's no BBC and ITV telly on. So yeah, like Bush. So inherently it's not funny until you put Miss in front of it, because it basically is effectively pubes. So it's like Miss Bush, and I remember years ago when we worked with someone, she's like, there's nothing you can't make funnier by using the word Bush in front of it. So yeah, so despite there being, Bush being a brand of electrical stuff, a bit being a band called Bush and things like that, Miss Bush is definitely like, inherently people are like, oh, Miss Lady Garden. That's what.
I love that, and I love that it's just there's so much history behind it. There's so many stories that you can tell. Like it's just all part of the fabric of Miss Bush. It's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was set up in such a kind of like almost like an ingenue kind of way. Not, there was nothing to. I mean, the conversation about branding from like 40 years ago, like unless you were like British Airways or you were a giant sort of like American-owned super brand, I mean, that conversation about, the 80s was a real kind of like acceleration period, wasn't it, for like advertising, and very much like, everybody at my uni wanted to leave uni and work for like Saatchi and Saatchi at the time. I think this was before he was pictured grabbing Nigella around the throat in public. But, it's like, but that's very much like, that's people like working in advertising was where all the cool creative people were, where Ridley Scott was, there were lots of people working in that at the time. So I think that like when you set something up without that background and against that backdrop of the 80s, then you can have Miss Bushes. And actually, honestly, to be fair, like when I first started I'll briefly cover how I got there. So basically what happened is when I was in my 20s, I got married and I was pregnant with my daughter by the time I was about 26, had it when I was 27. And so we moved, I think my mum put me on a mailing list for the Ripley estate agents, and we got sent like a fix-upper of a cottage to buy in Ripley, which is what we did. So I lived in an absolute like squat situation when my daughter was born. And so to get out of that squat, I used to put her in a pram and just walk the sort of 5 minutes to the centre of the village and have like coffee with the girls that worked there. And it was really, really homespun. I mean, they didn't start work until 10 and they finished at 4, and they were packing up at 3:30. Like there was no appointments, there was no knowledge about the brides before they came in. It was just, this looks nice. Everyone brought their, literally, honestly, I'm not even joking, everyone brought a wicker basket to work that worked there and brought their lunch in a wicker basket with almost like a cloth over it, like Mrs. Tiggy Winkle. So it was adorable and very sweet. And then basically I was absolutely flat broke and at home with a child, and I didn't have any friends or anyone, and no one I knew had a baby. So like there were a nursery opened in the village, and I thought, well, I'm just going to like blag a job at my mum's. So I've got something to do. I didn't have a car either. You can't get anywhere in Ripley without a car. So it was like really weird. So that I fell into working at Miss Bush's because I was broke. I was ridiculously young to have a baby. I think in this day and age, most people don't have a kid till in their 30s. I don't think now almost. But did you have Felix in your 20s?
It was 28, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, it's quite young.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just felt really young. Do you know what I mean? I just looked really young in the pictures with her. So yeah. So it's quite interesting that, like, basically I was like, Georgia, you are going to nursery at the age of 1. And she's now sings our podcast theme tune. So whatever you do, you can't get away from family businesses. They're just in you, around you. And it's like shaking off a kind of really bad cold. If you want to try and get out. Or maybe like something like a really bad, there's always scar tissue if you try and get out of bridal. So yeah, we're still there. So that's how I ended up working there for no reason. I had no desire to have a wedding dress shop. I wasn't really that interested in anything apart from, weirdly enough, the marketing and the branding and the actual buying. Because I was like, do we think this looks fashionable in any way? Do we think this is client centric? Do we think this? Do we think that? And actually, it's not really surprising that after I did start working there, pretty much all the Miss Tiggy Winkles left.
Oh.
It's quite bad, right? No, they didn't all leave, but do you know what I mean? It was just like, it was very much a sort of change of pace, because you actually, if you're going to do this, it's got to, you've got to sell some stuff. And my background at the time was working in marketing in London, and so I did that. And I was like, and I was young, and I was the age of the bride, so I'd be like, do we think that all of you people that are 30 years older than the brides really know what they're looking for? Which I guess is what I'm thinking now when I was talking last week about staying relevant. But then I do surround myself with a lot more youthful staff. So it's not like I've got a group of staff that are all my age. I'm like older by years than everybody else. So yeah, that is like a potted history. It's forward wind to 37 years. Here we are today. Miss Bush, still a funny name.
I love that.
Yeah.
I hope people found that interesting, because I love hearing like little stories from history.
Bad old days. I know, it's really weird, yeah.
It might be a good segue into a question that we've had on Instagram. So somebody has said they'd love to know what, from a bridal perspective, has remained true, never changes style-wise then and now, and is there one thing that you hear over and over, regardless of fashion?
I guess one of the things that stayed really, I mean, it's a kind of like, it seems a fairly obvious point, but the colour ivory, that has stayed really consistent for 37 years. I mean, we've had pastel departures on occasions. Oh yeah, we had that person. You sent me a link to a TikTok, didn't you? That girl, Sammy, who's an influencer. Sammy, I have no idea who she is. Got loads of tattoos.
Yeah, Sammy Jeffcoat, her surname is.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, so she had a Jenny Packham dress when we did Jenny Packham dresses that was in a pale silver colour. So sometimes you'll get some precious metal colours like silver or gold. Sometimes you will get some pastels in there, like a really blush pink or something like that. Occasionally we've done some very bold, black and white things, but really...
Yeah, when I was looking back at some photos recently, because we've got a folder of very old photos that have been scanned in, there was a period when there were lots of dark red dresses with kind of white embroidery on the top. And
yeah, but do you know what that was? Was because at that point, which was the 90s, that literally, unbelievably, was only the time when you could get married somewhere other than a registry office or a church. So basically,
castles and things came in.
Yeah, and so people suddenly, it was very reflective. The fashion suddenly reflected that. And we did, there was a designer that did the really strong coloured stuff that we did called Nikki Hill, who was based in Botley in Southampton. She did these very strong brocade dresses, and they had plaited sort of silk shoulders on them, so it looked very medieval. And then strong rich brocades with contrasting red silk skirts. So she was someone that did that. We also had another brand from the Midlands somewhere called Temptations by Design, and they basically, their specialist thing was definitely everything had sort of gothic points on it. So They had like embroidered dresses with gold piping, and everything was really pointy. Everything looked like it laced up at the front. All the trains had shaped gold kind of like decorative edges, so that they could all have been sort of like from again slightly from a medieval / Tudor
like a
vibe.
tapestry.
Yeah, but I just think it was that opportunity for people to get married in places that were not traditional spaces that kind of informed the fashion. And obviously we still see that now. If someone's getting married in a pub in the East End of London, we almost know what they're going to be wearing and what their photography style is going to be looking like. So I think that bridal has always reflected that changing social status, basically. And I guess that's like, for me, is probably the most interesting part of working in the industry for this long, is that kind of sociology part of it. So where sociology and style and culture all kind of crash into each other, and you can look at how directly bridal fashion is influenced by exterior forces. I mean, it's a bit like, I don't want to be rude, but it's a bit like we don't really stock the sort of Australian and kind of Israeli brands because they're too sexy. But what you can see is like, it's not really classic British style, but you can see a very kind of international influence on brides now for wearing and buying things that seem much more natural to like a different culture or a different climate. And then people are just wearing them here when they don't feel they almost feel like, to me, they feel like wearing a white t-shirt when you come back off holiday with a tan. It's like that. I can't, like, it's like, well done, you can wear that really revealing thing now because, for about 3 weeks before your tan fades, but then you'll go back to a black polo neck and some thick tights and boots because remember we're in Northern Europe.
I know what you mean. There's the dresses that their kind of promotional images are all shot on beaches. If you wear that in like a big stately home, it doesn't look right.
No, it wouldn't even look very right. If I took that down onto South Sea Beach, it'd look a bit of a tool, unless you've got
cold.
Unless you've got your like whatever that dry robe things that over the top of it. Do you know what I mean? So it's not very British beach. So, and I remember like doing a dress for a girl who was based in South Africa, and she lived in South Africa, just was over with family and got a dress from us. And I remember putting her into a spaghetti strap dress or something, and she was like, "Yeah, all my bikinis are this shape." I'm like, All your bikinis? You have more than one bikini? Oh my God, you have a bikini wardrobe? So like basically like all of us will bring the same shabby piece of swimwear out, unless we're going somewhere away with girls or we're going on a hen do. I feel like I bought a bikini for this last year because I've been on 2 holidays now with the same 2 ghastly, horrible, black, fat old lady swimsuits. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, I actually, they're just hot and nasty and uncomfortable, so I'm not wearing them anymore. People get worried about seeing my hip replacement scar, my appendix scar, my stretch marks. Just going to get over them. I'm going to have to really truly live and breathe the body positivity. But I've still only got one bikini, not a wardrobe of bikinis. So
I don't own one. I've never owned one.
Have you not?
I've never had a bikini.
I could see you though being
like a 1920s swimsuit.
Yeah, but down to the knees with a frill or something like that. Yeah,
I just got a sporty one. That's it.
I can't even really see you in a sporty swimming costume either, to be honest.
I can't swim, so that might be part of it.
Okay, so there we go then. So that's like that. That's cleared up that mystery of why I can't imagine you in the swimwear or sportswear.
Yeah, I need like a ruffled gothic kind of thing, don't I?
And then you could just be rolled to the edge of the water in a Victorian bathing cart, just plunged in and dragged out again, just for your health.
With a little swim cap on.
Yeah, exactly that. Yes. So, okay. So that's like a massive sidebar. But ivory. I know that sounds a ridiculous thing to say, but the most enduring colour that we have in our weddings, and we have had for 37 years, is ivory. And ivory comes in theory different shades of off-white. So if we were like Farrow and Ball, we'd have a million different names for the slight variations of what that is. And also ivory can look different depending if you've got ivory flat matte crepe, or you've got ivory satin, or you've got an ivory taffeta. or an ivory lace, they all look really quite different against the skin tone. So it's not to say that ivory is universally flattering, but it is the naturally occurring colour of silk. And so I think that's been the kind of, the benchmark for what is endured. And possibly the reason why people who want to be radical and different will choose something else. Bizarrely, in the 2 times I've got married, I've never got married in ivory.
No.
But
No,
would
you
feel
had a
like
black wedding dress the first time, didn't you?
and then a blue one.
Blue.
Yeah. So I've never got married in ivory. So yeah.
Okay, and this question also has a follow-up question. What has gone that you would love to come back? I would say those Nikki Hill dresses.
Yeah, just like let's have some like lush
Let's
colour.
have some fun.
Yeah. So I would say what has gone is well, firstly, when I first came into the business, there was lots and lots of very small artisanal brands. So Nikki Hill in Southampton, we had like somebody called Lilla Lace, who was based up in Cheshire somewhere. We had obviously Karen Ashton, who did my first wedding dress. Somebody called Anna Christina. There was another person who we didn't have but was stocked in Guildford, Catherine Rayner. We had a really amazing designer called Alison Blake, whose like dresses all featured the most exquisite embroidery. So it was just that there was lots of effectively like small batch gin brands of wedding dresses, and effectively they got absolutely washed away by a big influx of Chinese manufactured dresses in the 90s. And it doesn't, and again, I feel like I'm not against things being made in China in any way. I love my iPhone being made in China. That level of uniformity and that capacity for like industrial hugeness is what they do well. But I think it bears saying that like things that you think are made in Australia, like Made with Love or Jane Hill or Grace Loves Lace, are all mass-produced Chinese dresses. And so what you find is you get a uniformity and a lack of the dresses. You look at the brands and they could be anything, because they could easily, you could see how one of those could be marketed under somebody else's banner, because it doesn't matter how individual the design is when they go into it, the fabrics and the factories that are making them are all the same. And I know loads of people love that, and that's completely fine and completely okay. But I think what I particularly liked is that small batch artisanal look. And also you've got some of our brands today like Sassy Holford and Suzanne Neville, who we stock, and we used to stock Stephanie Allen, who's only just retired, that are still making in the UK. But those are brands that managed to elevate themselves out of that very cottage industry and establish really big credible businesses out of it. But imagine that they were only 3 of about like 30 or 40 independent cool brands like that were really working. And that again had its kind of side effect of being ethical and traceable and sustainable, and the sourcing was good, and it you could meet local trends, and it could be a little bit more diverse. But I suppose in some respect it wasn't as fashiony. It was very craft based. So that's just a thing. So I would love to see more artisanal brands and things.
I just feel like this is like, we could just put a little plug for Nautier here.
Oh yeah, we could do a little plug.
Are you describing Nautier right now?
Well, sort of am describing Nautier. I mean, like, again, I don't know how evident it is. Well, I've just written the website for Nautier, but I don't know how evident it is. Nautier is a brand that we stock at Miss Bush, and effectively it's not a house brand exactly, but it's a brand that I own in conjunction with Ben and Adrian, who are the talent and the creativity of the brand. They are literally, Ben designs and Adrian makes, and like they both like work with patterns, cutting patterns and things like that. But why I wanted to really encourage this is I saw that they did a little collection during lockdown, with a view that they wanted to sell it. And because obviously they did used to have a retail space, what they've done is like produce things that I thought looked too similar to some existing brands. And I was like, I know why you've done this. It's because if you want to take orders, you've got to have something that looks a little bit Jesus Pero or a little bit something. And I was like, I think that your most interesting pieces are the ones that you've done that come from the soul and not from a commercial point of view, because of all these giant, Chinese made dresses, like, and big behemoth brands like Pronovius or, Made with Love or whatever. So you can't compete with that capacity. You can't compete with that, that mass market, mass production. So the way you've got to go into, I believe, it is with something that really ignites a passion in your soul, and it's very flexible, and you are, able to create something that's more of a testament to your design soul, rather than trying to think you can take on factories that produce 10,000 wedding dresses a week. You can't even take on a brand that produces 5,000 dresses a year. What you need to do is create a little brand that can potentially do, hopefully could that do up to maybe 50 dresses a year, like one a week or something would be really lovely. But that's such a microscopic drop in the ocean. And I can see why when the whole thing changed in the 90s, why independent British brands couldn't survive, because they couldn't compete with the price. But is that a dog barking?
Yes, Scratch is barking. I'm quite impressed, actually. It's been half an hour and it's the first bark. So we've got a man here redoing our bathroom. So I was anticipating noise and barking. I was quite stressed about it, and it's been okay.
The full 101 Dalmatians Twilight barking going on.
It helps that he's gone slightly deaf now, so people can be in the house and he doesn't know about it straight away.
Oh, well, good. Yes. Exciting.
Yeah,
anyway, so sidebar dog bark, there we go. So
Yes, and this is quite good, actually, that we've managed to talk for over 30 minutes now without you mentioning the fact that I haven't done my homework yet.
You haven't done your homework, though. Literally, you haven't done your homework, which is bad, because...
No, last week you set me the task to watch The Substance.
And Nosferatu.
And I didn't do either of those things. I'm sorry. I will do them this week.
I know,
I couldn't go and see Nosferatu because it was so cold at the weekend that it was -5 and it was foggy. I couldn't see the end of my road, so I just decided I wasn't leaving the house. So that's why.
Do you know, that's quite safe. Can I just also say something that's completely irrelevant to anything to do with this? I was driving to work on Saturday and it was -5. And I didn't really, like the roads are all quite messy because they've got so much salt and grit on them. And my windscreen was getting fogged up with all the dirt. So I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some water. One of those things where you spray water and your windscreen wipers do that immediately. So I sprayed water. My windscreen wipers did that. The water immediately froze on the screen. I couldn't see. And I was driving at 70 miles an hour.
Oh, no, that's terrifying.
So I had to think, literally in split seconds, I had to think, really slow down, but don't brake. And then luckily my car has got one of those incredibly super fast turbo front window defrosters and backwards. But so, I mean, I could vaguely see through it, but it was like, oh my God. And I was just like, you absolute idiot. But it's never occurred to me. I've never in my entire, whatever it is, 40 years of driving, that's never happened. And I've driven on
frozen onto the screen immediately.
Literally, So I guess it was like, if the car hadn't have been warm, then the water in the windscreen wiper washer things would have been frozen and wouldn't have come out. So that was just dangerous. Yeah. It was a dangerous thing. So I need to remind people, if it says it's -5 on the car, on your clock as you're driving your car, then you basically can't do that because it's really, really dangerous.
Yeah. So I was I'm not going to go risking my life to watch a film, even though I really, really want to see it.
And also, I think I sent you a bride's quiz, didn't I? I was like, look at this client. I can't wait to meet her.
You're like, is this our dream bride? Yes.
Yes. And so she emailed me this week. So I don't know, she'd got a typo in one of her emails to us. It said her appointment was on Halloween in 2026. I was like, well, it isn't, but it's in a couple of weeks' time. But so she basically she said, got my dream. Her quiz that she'd filled in was like, oh my God, I literally can't wait for this appointment. I just can't
One of
wait.
the questions that we say is just describe your personal style in 3 words. And she said, goth meets Abercrombie.
I know, but
I love that.
that just like sounds like an episode of American Horror, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
Is
it
it
does.
literally like, oh my god, I can't wait for that. And also, I probably think this is some massive GDPR breach, but I showed my son her quiz, which I suppose it wouldn't be because we all have to read the quizzes to know what we need to get ready for
Yeah,
like people's
you're
appointments.
not giving out her details or anything, like sharing the text is fine. And just say in our privacy policy that we'll use the information in the quiz to help us at your appointment. So, like, it's helping to talk about it.
Yeah,
It's getting you excited.
But my son was like, I can't believe she's getting married to someone else. This is my dream woman. She like horror films and gaming, and she works in CGI, and basically he was like, this is my dream woman. This is her.
If this bride's listening right now, she's gonna be like, "Oh God, I'm not coming in."
No, I know.
I'm scared.
No, I think she'll like it. She'll like coming to a chapel with a bunch of horror obsessed.
Yeah, when's she
kind of
coming
people.
in? I'm gonna come too.
It's February sometime. So yeah, she's definitely coming in, and it's going to be great. And she's she even sent me a picture of an amazing Victorian pendant that her mum gave her for Christmas, and she's like, I think this might be cursed. I'm like, yes,
Oh.
bring it into the chapel, see what
Bring
happens.
it in.
I know our chapel is deconsecrated, but it's still a church. So yeah, no, I feel like, so basically, I had actually gone back to her and it was like, I am obsessing about Lily Ray's Depp's look in Nosferatu, so much so that I wasn't really, really scared while the film was going on. Did I watch that? I think I watched that after, like, we did the podcast last week, didn't we? Hadn't watched it by then.
You had watched it. We mentioned it briefly last week and said that we'd talk about it this week.
I'm sure that was The Substance, not Nosferatu. I think I went to Nosferatu on Wednesday, like last week, because I took the kids. Yeah, I don't think it was
because we did speak about, because we were talking about a bride that was also gothic.
I probably had also done the.
Yeah, well, I've especially for you today put on a kind of gothic blouse and parted my hair.
Yeah. It's giving me strong Wednesday Addams, I have to say, yeah. Well, and also I was just looking for anybody that's watching on anything. You haven't done a clip for Instagram for ages, have you, of us talking?
No.
It would be a good day to do it today, where you do actually look proper goth.
Yeah, well, I'm actually like dressed up for a change.
Yeah, but my hair has got so long because I basically was I've got my haircut booked for the day before our content day. So I'm literally wondering whether I need to like literally do some kind of more like, I don't know what, like some barcode fringe or something.
Ooh,
but it is like,
good.
I don't know. There we go. Anyway, so yeah, so like, but I think it's got to be like stressed that basically, I think in bridal terms, goth doesn't mean like big ear stretchers and like big platform shoes or
it's not metal.
Yeah. And there's also like a goth DJ who's my age, who's just running a kind of a campaign to like a crowdfunder for treatment for an illness that he's got. And he's one of those people that has actually, his makeup's so extreme, he actually looks like Nosferatu in real life. So I will also send you a picture of him as well. And you can't even, his first name looks like on Instagram, like Dak, D-A-H-C, Dak Dharma the 8th or something. It's just, I have no idea what that means, if that's rude in any way. But so what we were not saying...
But did you say, I've got to interrupt you, sorry, there was the UK Drag Race thing that was on last week, and Sacha Velour did a bat dance dressed as Nosferatu.
What UK Drag Race thing is on?
No, it was a show, like a Comic-Con thing.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, I didn't see that, no.
Like a convention thing, but she did the After Hours show. And also the UK King Dolls did, that Sing Sang Song.
Oh, okay.
They did a performance of that as well. I've just been watching clips on Instagram instead of watching The Substance, like I was supposed to.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So, so basically, but what we mean in goth terms, though, is like almost kind of that slightly like a central character out of a book, a bookish person, someone who's slightly kooky, quirky, outsiderish, doesn't completely like, that's pretty but it's hard, it's not girly, you don't lean into like generic sexiness. So there's a kind of thing that I mean about goth, pretty goth. It's got nothing to do with a goth you might see.
Yeah, or like a Victorian Gothic horror novel
Yeah.
type of goth is more what we're
It's
talking
just
about.
incredibly pretty, and it leans a little bit into costume drama. And so it's not like a themed wedding. There's a goth night they run in one of the pubs down here, and I like stalked the DJ and his wife, and they got married looking like 1980s goths from that could have been in the crowd at a Damned gig, or like a Susan Banshee's gig. It's very kind of got,
big backcombed
yeah,
black hair.
absolutely, that kind of look. Yeah, so we're not talking about that. We're talking more on the literary sense of goth, as opposed
It's really
to
hard to describe, like, because I would describe myself as a goth, but I don't look like what you would imagine.
but that's why there was quite a lot of backlash against Tish Weinstock's book from actual goths.
How to be goth.
They were like, this is not about being a goth. This is not like, listening to The Cure all of the time. And it's like, that's not quite what it's. Gothic isn't a genre that was invented by goths in the 80s. Gothic is something
it goes way further back than that.
To architecture and art and all sorts of things. So we'll try and explain that.
I feel like we could do a whole separate podcast just about that.
I know, we could. But yeah, but we've got a content day coming up, so we want to try and reflect that. And I actually spoke to Jill, the florist, and said, can I get lilac blossom? And she's like, no, you can't get anything interesting at this time of the year. And I'm like, sad, because it literally, after like Nosferatu sniffing like the locket and going, lilac, you kind of, that's what you want, is kind of lilac blossom, but
we'll have to do that later in the year, won't we?
And they've also cast a blonde model. So,
I know, because I've sent you the a big plan of things that I would like to achieve on the day, and Gothic looks is one of them. But I don't know if we can do that with.
I just have to look and see what a blonde goth looks like.
Yeah, or we could just do one another time. Because then we get to do another one.
Yeah, we've got to. We've set that as a goal for the year, haven't we? 4 content days.
Yes.
Doesn't sound like a lot. But
no,
it is
but we
quite
only did 1 last year, and I did manage to get 13 reels out of it. So
yeah, but to be fair, you did do a lot of like content creation at the Cowdrey thing as well, but not much of me talking.
No, and they're the ones that do really well.
Yeah, unbelievably. Right, and so you didn't also watch The Substance, so you're also going to watch that, because I literally it has so many things to say about and the bit that the shot that I put on the Insta stories was the picture of Demi Moore looking at herself in the mirror, getting ready to go out for a night out. Somebody had invited her on a date, and he said that she was beautiful, still the most beautiful person, and you can see that. But what in the film, what happens is she's getting ready, and she looks great, and she looks 61 great. She looks unbelievably fabulous. But every time she leaves the bathroom, she sees the other version of herself, this young version, on a huge billboard. And her confidence crumbles, and she goes back and she redoes her makeup and she redoes her makeup until she absolutely ends up having a complete nervous panic attack, breaking down and not leaving the house. So relatable to everybody. It doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes when you just look in the mirror and you are battling your reflection so hard, and actually on another day you'd think you look great.
Yeah.
But that day, and people could tell you, but that battling of the reflection is, if you imagine, that's what I see day in, day out for my jobs I've done myself, and I see other women doing over 30, how many years did I say it was? 7 years. Do you know what I mean? It's like that battle is, it's so emblematic, that kind of scene in the film, and I think you need to watch it. You just, even if you like didn't love the rest of it, or you find it gory and disgusting, and it is gory and disgusting, that scene is just so good, and I would give Demi Moore a Golden Globe for that. She totally deserved it. So the conversation there is so, that whether or not you're looking at your younger self or comparing yourself to your younger version of you, or whether you're just, the whole conversation about what you look like in a mirror. I wonder what it would be like if you just lived in a house with no mirrors. Would you feel really, really liberated?
I think so. Like, I've definitely had those days where I've just looked in the mirror and been like, no, this is wrong. It's just, But then there's days when you're in such a rush, you don't even have time to look in the mirror and you just leave. And you probably look worse, but you don't know. So
Yeah.
you don't know about it.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, that's a constant irony of what I do, with this kind of like bridal search for perfection and what you look like in the mirror.
It's like that quote that you're always quoting, though, about your future you purring on your current self.
Yes.
So, like that's
Caitlin Moran, thank you. Yeah,
yes.
no, absolutely. But you do need to watch both those films, because one, for the content, two, for the conversation about that relationship. And as I say, the relationship that, because I'm obviously seeing mothers and daughters together quite often, and effectively nowhere is more that conversation. We don't talk about it. You know, sometimes we talk about it in terms of like that madness of suddenly one moment you've got a baby and the next moment they're like standing in a wedding dress like 28 years later or something, and it's like, oh my god, that's that horror film, isn't it? 28 years later. That's the follow-up to the 28 days and
28 years is coming out next year.
So anyway,
this year.
28 years later, it looks like the average at the moment of the age of the brides that are coming in. It's quite young this year. And so people's mums are there. And so I think also those people's mums, like, we're not old mothers now, even in our 50s. No one's old. All the mums have got cool clothes on, cool handbags, cool trainers. Do you know what I mean? This is like, 50 being the new 40 is a really relevant thing. But you still have got that kind of, there is that conversation where you can see aging has happened. Two people that look very similar and one's more aged than the other. And we're both really trying to impress on the younger woman that they should enjoy their youth and beauty, because it's fleeting and it's fantastic and you shouldn't question it. But the same thing, I guess, if I would ever had the privilege to live as old as my mum is, then again, you'd be like, she's moaning about being an old lady, she can't hear anything. And I'm like, it's kind of how it goes though, no? But embracing that and being okay with it is very different. Like genuinely living with it, genuinely accepting it. So, yeah. But yeah, you got to get through the bloodshed in it. But maybe it would be quite good after your little rant this morning, maybe watching Mindless Violence. And
I don't
mindless. There's no mindless violence in it, actually. There's just a lot of blood.
You know that I don't mind a bit of gore and violence anyway.
Yeah.
I'm massively into like zombie horror films.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in there. So, but yes, so I think that's so that's your homework that you didn't do. So good.
I will do it this week.
Okay, good. Okay. Yes, so, is there anything else that we need to talk about today, or we got to the end of our agenda?
We have 47 minutes.
Oh, go us. So you've got two things you wanted to ask, haven't you? Firstly, which was like how to end the podcast, and secondly, how do the rest of Entertainment get so many questions?
Yes, I listened to the rest of Entertainment last week, which is the one you're always mentioning with Richard Osman and Marina Hyde. And they had an episode which was all the questions they'd been asked, and they get really good questions. So like, but I suppose it helps when you're famous.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and I'd say that all of those Goal Hanger podcasts are doing really well. So that's the company that Gary Lineker opened. So, like, Gary, if you're listening, if you ever want to do the rest is weddings, we're here for you.
Oh yeah, we could do that.
We could definitely do that. The rest is bridal.
What I'm saying though is, ask us your most ridiculous questions.
I just don't think I just wonder whether it's quite tricky. Maybe people don't know what they want to ask anyway. But I did also another thing that I was going to put in today, which I didn't put in today, was I did one of those sort of time hop things that comes up on Facebook. There was one 6 years ago. You were doing digital school, and I was like, wow. Oh, I know. I had so much I wanted to say about that. It was like,
Looks Bride.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do a Looks Bride episode. We can talk about our experience doing that and why we stopped and all sorts.
There's a lot in that. There's a lot to do. And it speaks a lot to people like women running these, like bridal or wedding based businesses as well. There's so much that would be interesting, I think, for the trade and our experience of that.
We did also have that other question that we haven't answered yet, from that bridal boutique that said that they're not getting appointments and they don't know why. So we need to also do that.
I absolutely can see why they're not getting appointments, because there's nothing in their marketing that suggests that they want to have appointments or that they've got anything to do. It's not enough.
Let's save that for next week.
Yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough to have a retail premises and dresses. That is what I'm saying. So I can see why. But yeah, I've got plenty of thoughts on that.
Tune in next week for that.
Okay, and what is our sign-off going to be?
You stay classy, right?
No blue Mondays here.
Yes.
Bushy Mondays.
See you next Monday.
Bye.
Bye.
You'd like to know, wouldn't you? You'd like to know